Back to Young Engineers of Today. And my computer just suddenly decided, there we go. Welcome back to Young Engineers of Today. I hope you are ready to continue with Inkscape. I apologize for missing out last week. I'm feeling much better. Hey, Cademan, and hey, Jasper. Um, so hopefully that's not something we should run into again. But we'll go ahead and we will get started on what we're meant to do this week. But first, a little bit of review from Monday. I am not. You are correct. In fact, it was supposed to be me last Wednesday, but I was feeling under the weather. I'm sure you guys saw that post on iMoto, but Mr. Dubik was able to pick up my slack and hold the class anyway. Um, so yeah, last week I say Monday, you guys went over vector graphics and the difference between. Yeah, that's just because since we were both logging in with the same username for the session, um, it's just got one username, so it'll just say Tom Dubik. Um, the more you know. Star going across a rainbow. Um, so yeah, the difference between vector graphics and raster graphics. Raster graphics are colors and squares, essentially. It's just a grid of squares with colors in them, whereas vector graphics is taking mathematical equations and turning them into a picture. And that's really honestly the difference between the two. Uh, nice. Um, the main difference is raster graphics can be very easy to make in code. Vector graphics can require a little bit more work. As pictures increase in complexity, vector graphics can become larger file sizes. That's, as I understand it, Aiden, that is probably going to happen. Yes. But you'll know for certain when you start meeting up more regularly in labs and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, it might be infinity tables. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, I will at the end of class, Cademan. That's just not really relevant right now, but it's cool. I'm definitely curious. Um, But yeah, as pictures get more complex, vector graphics can have a harder time replicating those pictures and become larger files. On the other hand, vector graphics can be scaled up pretty much infinitely, and their file size doesn't really change with the literal size of the picture. Whereas with raster graphics, um, the larger your picture is, the larger the image is going to become by a fairly significant amount. But yeah, so those are the main differences between the two. Let's see here. I'm just looking through everything else. You guys went over the installation process for Inkscape. Is that correct? You went through downloading and installing it and all of that. Raise your hand if you've got Inkscape installed. I do. Okay, so just about every hand. Raise your hand if you're working on getting it installed, but you know how to do it, and you'll just be able to get it up and running. Okay. All right. Well, excellent. Just go ahead and work on that. We'll spend some time. I'll walk through the interface of Inkscape and everything like that, because I believe where you left off with Mr. Dubik last time was how to install, and you guys didn't actually get the opportunity to mess around with Inkscape yet. So that's what we're going to get started on today, and we're gonna get ourselves familiarized with it. All right. So this install assumes that you have Xquartz. If you're running on a Linux machine, um, or a Windows machine, that should be less complex than that. And mine just finished installing. So this is a perfect opportunity to show you how long it can take for it to start up the first time you ever start up Inkscape, which that is to say, a long time. So let me go ahead and open up my copy. Do a search here, Inkscape, boom. Go ahead and click on it to get it started up. And it's going to take a minute to get started up. Everybody's computers is going to open it up at a different pace, at a different speed. But don't be surprised if your Inkscape takes even like 5 or so minutes to open up. Because what it's doing right now is it's going through all of the fonts on your computer and building its own set of libraries in vector form. So that you can take any font that you have on your computer and put it and use it in Inkscape in vector form so that it can be scaled up and stuff like that. So this takes a while. So you can see I started mine up probably about 30 seconds-ish ago. I'm just going to enjoy some nice, cool, delicious water while that's happening. Everybody had a good couple of days, though. Y'all enjoying your week so far? Excellent. Well, all right. So a couple of yeahs, a yes, and eh. I feel the but I'm glad everybody else is having a good week. Um, it's enjoy those times when new mouse and a tripod. Awesome. That's pretty cool. Camcorder or camera, like a video camera or a picture camera. Oh, for your phone. Okay, awesome. Yeah, and this I've had the same mouse forever. Hopefully it'll last me another couple of years. All right, so my Inkscape is opened. If yours hasn't opened yet, don't fret. It'll probably open eventually. Um, like I said, it's just going to take a minute. I don't have that many fonts on my computer. If you've installed any additional fonts on your computer, expect this to take longer. If you've got, a slower CPU, less memory, expect it to take longer. So it could be a fairly lengthy process. Don't sweat it if it takes a minute. All right, so let's see here. Are you getting a new mouse and PC, or getting a new mouse and PC, new mouse and keyboard because of new PC? That's pretty awesome. All right, so first off, all of your stuff is oh nice. First off, excellent. Let's get used to navigating the canvas. So you can use the scroll wheel in order to move up and down on the canvas. You can click in the well, you used to be able to. You can hold down Shift and use the mouse wheel in order to pan it left and right. You can also use the page up and page down keys. Sometimes, not in my case. That is also generally a valid key combination for moving up and down. You might have to zoom in a little bit more. Let's zoom in. Boom. Nope, not working for me, but that's okay. You can hold down the control key and scroll the mouse wheel in and out in order to zoom in and out. And you probably can't see it right now because I'm doing it so quickly that the refresh rate looks really weird, but you might see it a little bit. But yeah, so on let go control, use the mouse wheel, up and down. Hold down Shift, use the mouse wheel, left and right. Hold down Control, use the mouse wheel, zoom in and out. Pretty easy to move around. Pretty basic, pretty simple. It's not like you can really say much as far as that's concerned. If you've ever used like a photo editing program before, anything like that, you're probably pretty used to those kinds of controls. That shouldn't come as a huge surprise to you. It might be a little bit different just because of the fact that Inkscape also assumes a paper almost kind of, or some sort of physical media like a photo or like a canvas or something like that. So sometimes you might think that the zoom is flipped with the scroll, um, but by and large, it's a pretty familiar interface. So drawing and editing shapes in Inkscape. That's what you guys were all waiting for. Well, more or less. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff, but um, using Inkscape, learning how to use Inkscape, that's what you guys are probably more interested in than me just sort of talking at you about how to scroll around in Inkscape. So first things first, anytime you're working on a new project in Inkscape, you want to make sure that you're working on the proper sized canvas. So for those of you who have it open, you can go over here to File and then Document Properties. Alternatively, you can hold down Shift and then Control and hit D on your keyboard in order to open it up. And this will be the Document Properties window. And as you can see, we get a whole mess of things. And not to mention the fact that there are a whole bunch of different tabs and stuff like that with different information in there, blah, blah, blah. But we're going to stick to the page right now, the page tab, because the page tab is going to provide us the information that we need in order to basically address the thing that I'm talking about right now, which is make sure that your canvas is the correct size. Now, a lot of times, people are going to be working in metric units. So for that reason, custom size defaults to millimeters. That's all well and good. However, a lot of the stuff that you're going to be getting in lab and things like that, and if you're working with predominantly, maybe if you're doing this in the future as your job or whatever like that, and you're working with a predominantly American company, they're going to probably want the size to be delineated in inches, in which case you can change your units over here from millimeters to inches. You can do points, and I forget that one, and centimeters and pixels. Like, I realize that that's not what this is at all, but I want to say parsecs because that's just where my brain goes. But if you're denoting a canvas size in parsecs, you might want to scale down a little bit. Just maybe a little bit, considering that that's roughly, I want to say 3-ish light years. Yeah, it's big. So you don't want to be working in parsecs. That's not what this means. I can't remember what it means right now. But yeah, millimeters, points, inches, centimeters, and pixels. We're going to be interested in inches right now. As you can see, it automatically converts it. If we're in millimeters, look, 210 millimeters by 297 millimeters. If we convert it to inches, 8.2 inches by 11.6 inches, with a whole lot of, leftover stuff. So 8.26722 inches and 11.62 or 69291 inches, so on and so forth. This is where you're going to change the size of your canvas in order to reflect whatever material you're working with. If you start working with parametric design and stuff like that with Mr. Dubik in lab and things like that, he's going to want a specific size for your canvas, and that's where you change it, is here in the document properties. So we're going to go ahead and, just as an example, we're going to change the size of our canvas to 30 by 20 inches, which is pretty dang big, but we're going to do that. So 30 by 20 inches, we'll hit enter, and as you can see, it's resized itself. It is now wider than it is tall. So that's just something that happens automatically. If you want, you can go back to millimeters just to see how big that is, 762 millimeters by 508, but that's not really important. That's incidental. We'll also set the display units to inches. That way, these rulers up here and on the side will accurately reflect the scale that we're dealing with. See, if we put it in millimeters, you can see that all the numbering changes, which is weird if your measurements on the inside are in millimeters, but the measurements of your canvas size are in inches. So in order to keep consistency, we're going to set it to inches, and that should be perfect. So there we go. Now we've got our canvas. I just went ahead and closed out the window. You don't need to click save or anything like that because it automatically updates the document as you make changes in that window. So you don't need to worry about saving before you exit or anything like that. Conversely, if you be careful that you don't make changes in there that you don't mean to make. However, that gives me the perfect opportunity to introduce the best command ever for anybody who's working with computers on a regular basis. I'm sure you guys have heard of this before, but if not, be prepared for your life to change immeasurably forever. That command is, if you're on, yeah, you already got it, Jasper. If you're on a Windows or a Linux machine, you hold down the Control key. If you're on a Macintosh, you hold down the Command key. Generally, if you're using Inkscape, you're going to be holding down the Control key regardless because it's meant to, the Xquartz is meant to emulate Windows commands and stuff like that. But yeah, you got it, Catherine. Control Z. Control Z is undo. Control Y is also generally redo. So in case you undo a little bit too far, you can Control Y in order to redo. But pretty much any program worth its salt nowadays is going to have an undo. And granted, I didn't grow up with computers like you guys did, but I didn't really start using the undo key until I was about your age. This is such a weird conversation to have because it's such a specific thing to be talking about. But yeah, Control Z is your friend. You accidentally do anything, Control Z, boom, it's like it never happened. You don't have to figure out what you did wrong or anything like that. Control Z it. You Control Z too far, Control Y takes you back in the other direction. So I can undo everything, and then I can redo everything. And keep in mind, I'm holding down Control Z and Control Y right now, so I'm undoing a whole bunch of stuff. If I just hit the button a lot, I can do it in incremental steps. But yeah, so that's for you to store, lock away in your head for later for when you're working with things, because that will get you out of so many mistakes and accidents when you're working with computers. So many. I mean, I code a lot, and I work with graphics programs a fair amount. And I don't really have a whole lot of experience in graphics programs. I do it for the coding that I do so that I have graphics in order to slap onto my programs and things like that. And so many times I'll accidentally delete something that I didn't mean to in like GIMP or something like that. And Control Z saves my life. So I figured I'd introduce it to you now in case you didn't know about it. Anyway, navigating Inkscape. Yeah, the material is a 30 by 20 inch cardboard in this example. So now let's go through a lot of the tools that Inkscape has that you can work with. First off are the Shapes tools. The Shapes tools are good for building a basic sort of design and things like that that you can then modify. Or building, putting shapes on top of other shapes and stuff like that. But the whole idea behind the Shapes tool, tools, plural, let me go ahead and circle them over here. Circle them with my pen. Boom, put them right there. Those are the shape tools. And these allow you to sort of just create, well, like you would imagine, basic shapes in Inkscape. For instance, you've got the rectangle shape, and I can just select it and then draw a rectangle. Now I can also select a color, and it should cooperate with me. Fill and stroke are unset. There we go. So now if we select a color, we can actually, or we click a color down here, we can actually select a different color. The canvas is 30 inches wide by 20 inches tall. But yeah, so as you can see, the rectangle tool is very simple. I can just create some rectangles. Now I can go back to my selection tool. Excuse me one moment. My computer seems to not want to be responding. Sometimes it does a thing where mouse control is taken away from me. And it's not a hardware issue near as I can tell. But I can't nail down the problem to save my life. And so as you can see right here, I'm stuck on the rectangle tool, and I can still create new rectangles, but I can't actually select any new tools. And it's such a bizarre issue, and there's no consistency to it. But I found, interestingly enough, that opening up the task manager will very often fix the issue. Actually, I think alternatively here, I'm just going to close this without saving, and I'm going to restart it. Because really, it's not like my artwork, it's not like I'm really that concerned about losing all of my pretty purple rectangles. All right, so we'll change it to inches just like we did before, and it's not going to want to cooperate with us. I also should say that Inkscape is pretty finicky if you run it without restarting after installing. But this is just my life right now. Come on, Chimonga. All right, so let me go ahead and erase all the drawings too. All right, so now we can reselect that again, and I can do this, and I can change the color of the rectangles just like before. So it looks like GoToWebinar might have been the culprit there. Oh well. Now, what I was going to say before is I can select any of these little. See, when I draw a rectangle, I get these little nodes here. If I drag on the nodes, I can reshape the rectangle. Super exciting. However, there's this one circular node right here, and if I drag it down, I round the edges of the rectangle. If you have Windows, honestly, it's not. It's kind of like potato. You can do the MSI first, especially if you're running a newer version of Windows. Um, if that doesn't end up working, you can do the EXE, but both should work just fine. And chances are you're probably running a 64-bit version of Windows to address the next thing. So when it asks you either 32 or 64-bit, odds are very good that you're running a 64-bit at this point. It's been long enough that most people have upgraded to a 64-bit operating system, so I would say go with that one. But yeah, so I can change the parameters of this rectangle by dragging this node as well, and I can round off the edges. And so now I have this nice rounded looking rectangle. And see, all the ones that I draw after it have this sort of ellipse shape, which I can drag that back up in order to return back to a quadrilateral sort of shape, and 32-bit all day. Start drawing regular rectangles back again. And that's the rectangle tool. Super exciting, right? But you can layer things on top and create all sorts of crazy designs by layering shapes and things like that. Obviously, my strange rectangle mass over here is not an example of crazy shape, but as you can see, you can get kind of an idea that you can emulate more complex things by layering shapes. That's the word I'm looking for. I also apologize if words fail me like they did right there. It's been a bit of a long day, and so I'm not speaking as quickly as I'd like to. So the next tool down is this one that looks like a 3D rectangle, also known as a box or a cube, and that, true to its suggested picture, does in fact do that. As you can see, I can easily create this 3D box. I'm just clicking and dragging in order to resize it a whole bunch. But there, now I can let go, and then I get a whole bunch. So we got those 3 nodes with the rectangle. Now I got a whole bunch of nodes with this one. And what those are, they allow me to basically change the perspective on the box, like the vanishing point and things like that. So if I move these things around, I can then change the look of the box, which is pretty neat. So we can have a nice three-dimensional thing going on there. And then, in order to illustrate a point, I can draw a rectangle on top of it. I can rotate that rectangle. And then I can mess with the nodes on it so that it has, whoops, so that it has more of that kind of a thing. And I can skew it with this tool. And eventually, you know, if I were better with Inkscape, I would have a box that looks like it's actually plastered on the side of this, or excuse me, a rectangle that looks like it's plastered on the side of this box. All your boxes look funny. How do you fix it? What do you mean? Like they're all the same color or weird shapes? Like, are you trying to draw regular rectangles or are you trying to draw 3D boxes? Negative widths. Interesting. Um, hmm. That's an interesting question. You raise a good point. I'm not entirely sure. We can check it out at the end of class and see maybe if I just can't look over it with you, or you know, send me a picture in an email after class, and then we can try and troubleshoot it. Yeah, why don't we do that, and then we'll get it figured out. It could also be the place where you're trying to draw the rectangles, because see, there's always a vanishing point that exists. So if I change, and it's somewhere on the canvas. So as I move my boxes into different locations, as you can see, they all have a different perspective on them. So if you're on the right-hand side of your vanishing point, your boxes might look funky. Whereas if you're on the left-hand side, your boxes tend to look more traditional. So that could be it too. Ah, there you go. Yeah, alternatively, you can also move the vanishing point and all of the boxes update. Oh, right now we're just going over the basics of Inkscape, Jack. So no worries at all. Glad you're installing it, but yeah, no sweat. We're just running through right now the basic shape tools and stuff like that. But glad you're here. For sure. All right, so let me delete these because that's way too many boxes. It's overwhelming. All right, now we're back. We're back to where we were. Boom. All right, so that's the box tool. Now we got the circle tool. Look at that, it draws circles. Woo woo. And you can edit the nodes in order to turn them into wedges or Pac-Man circles. You know, you've got options, but this one's pretty straightforward. I mean, I don't think this is blowing anybody's mind right now. Let me go ahead and change that color, and then we'll do this one and change this color, and we'll do this one and change this color, and then we've got a whole selection of circles. Then you've got the star slash, well, they say polygon, but it's a pentagon there. This one's interesting. This one gets a little wonky. So let me zoom way in so that I can draw like a super small one. It draws stars. True to its name, it draws stars. My God, it's full of stars. However, you can do some weird things with the nodes on this one. So let me grab this one on the edge. I can make the star more like a starfish as opposed to a cartoon star. But then I can chill it back out again. I can also... No, I can't. So I can mess with sort of the legs of the star as well. However, if I grab this other one, I can tweak it so that it's more like a ninja star. I can bring it way, way in so that it's really super tiny, like a little explosion or something like that. I can bring it out so that it's a pentagon. I can bring it out further and create another star. Do like sort of a fractal kind of a thing. And then I can twist that and more until it sort of reverses and gets stuck in on itself. I can create a weird sort of buzzsaw kind of a design with it. Create another star on the inside with a pentagon inside of that star. You can do a lot with that one in particular, which is kind of neato. But that's why this one's sort of an interesting tool, because it's very, very specialized. But I don't know, maybe you run into needing to draw stars a lot. Stars can be kind of a pain to draw. So that's why that tool exists. Also, to note just how tiny those stars were. There they are. I'm going to circle them. There they are, right there on my canvas. Woo! Tiny, tiny stars. That's the nice thing about vector graphics, is the scalability on them is ridiculous. So let's say we made a super big star and we zoomed way in on it. See, if this were a raster graphic, this whole line would be blurry right here. This point would not be even remotely sharp. Yet here we are. The point remains sharp, the lines remain crisp, because vector graphics allow you to scale up in size and scale down in size. So we can have big old shapes on it and wee little itty bitty stars off in the corner. And that's okay. Vector graphics, they're fine with that. That's totally cool. So after the star, we've got another very specific one-use thing, and that is the spiral. Why does the spiral exist, you might ask? Because it does. It does. It is a spiral. Spirals can be tricky to create in vector art, so they have a specific tool in order to create spirals. And there you go. Now you've got your spiral tool. By dragging the outer node, you can affect the length of the outer end of the spiral. By dragging the inner node, you can affect the length of the inner length of the spiral. So we can create sort of a wonky circle that's not quite complete, that won't ever really complete, or we can continue it all the way in to its natural spirally conclusion. Too far, too far. There's only so far also that the node will spiral inwards, so just keep that in mind. But as you can see, again, like the edge of that, it's a sharp edge. Do another spiral here. That's our spiral tool. Pretty exciting, right? I thought so. Try and hold your applause. Look at all them spirals. So that's part of where the drawing in Inkscape comes in, is from combinations of these different tools and messing around with the nodes and the tools and stuff like that. However, well, so let's see here, creating shapes, blah, blah, blah. You can fill in stroke details. That's another good point. So also with editing these shapes, you can mess around with the fill and stroke details. If you just double click on So if you right-click on a shape, there is an option labeled Fill and Stroke. Click on it. And it should bring up a window eventually, somewhere. Yep, it's just thinking. There we go. Here's our Fill and Stroke window. So this is another way that we can edit these shapes as well, other than messing with the nodes and stuff like that. So fill is going to be the inside of the shape. So if we mess around with the color on fill, we can see that we're messing around with the color on the inside of the shape. We can change it to a gradient if we wanted to, or, well, different types of gradients. Or we can just have it be a solid fill because that's super easy to use. Then we've got stroke. Stroke, nice, Liam. Stroke is the outline of the shape. So let's zoom in a little bit. We'll add a stroke to it. As you can see, we get this black line around the edge of it. And the black line exists everywhere. So fill and stroke, inside and outside. Now, you've got stroke paint and stroke style. Stroke style allows you to affect the way that the line is actually styled. Stroke paint is just the color of the line, so we can change the color of the line to match the fill if we wanted to, or we can distinguish it. We can turn it to super ugly green, so that it stands out like crazy. Although black is pretty easy to see at a distance. But the stroke style is where we change how the stroke actually looks. See, we can turn it into a dashed line, or we can turn it into a cut line, or a Morse code line, or a absolutely nothing there, or a weird staggered kind of design, or you get the idea. You've got options as far as that. So, but we're going to keep it a solid stroke, and we're going to make it 0.001 inches, and we'll hit enter. And as you can see, we get this super tiny stroke. In fact, if we zoom out enough, we can't even really see it. I mean, granted, we could have created a super thick stroke as well, and if we zoomed out enough, we wouldn't be able to see it. It's all a matter of perspective. But as you can see, once we get the whole shape into the picture, we pretty much don't see that stroke anymore. It's a very, very, very tiny edge to it. That's actually something that you should keep in mind, because when you're working with designs in Inkscape for a laser cutter or something like that, it'll work with, it'll cut lines that have a stroke style or a stroke on them. Excuse me, it'll cut out shapes that have a stroke on them that's a width of 0.001 inches. That is sort of like the magic number in order to create that cutting line. And you'll also hear that from Mr. Dubik when you guys are working on the these designs in lab and stuff like that. But just keep that in mind for now. That is the cutting line. The selector tool allows you to select an object and look at its attributes and change some of its attributes and stuff like that. Exciting, I know. We've got the ellipse, the stars and the spirals. Yeah, the selector tool is the one that you're going to use a lot. Because the selector tool also, as you can see, I've selected this with the selector tool. It gives you these arrows here around the edge of a shape whenever you select it. And that allows you to resize your shape. Pretty self-explanatory. If you hold down Control and drag a corner, it will keep the same proportions as you resize your shape. However, if you let go of Control, you can just sort of like wiggle it around and do whatever you want with it. But if you keep Control held down, it keeps the same proportions on the shape, no matter what size you make it. Make it super, super tiny. Super, super tiny. And see, it's just, we can just keep it shrunk to a ridiculous size, or we can get it, we can blow back up to a much more reasonable size. Now, watch what happens when I click on something I've already selected with the selector tool yet again. The arrows change. These become rotation arrows as opposed to resize arrows, and that allows us to rotate the object. If we hold down Control it snaps it to certain orientations. So we'll snap it as, believe, 15 degrees at a time. If we hold down Shift, we change the point of rotation. Stuff you don't really need to know, but it's just kind of interesting right now. But that's one of the things that's good for the selector tool, and also we get all this information down here as well, so we can add a fill and a stroke, and we can um, do vector math on it, and just a whole bunch of other stuff. So that's part of the reason, well, it's actually the main reason why the selector tool is the most used tool in Inkscape, is because you got to select stuff before you affect it, before you edit it, before you do things with it. So you need the selector tool in order to do that. Pretty straightforward. You can move the shape by dragging it. Pretty self-explanatory. If you hold down Control while you're dragging it, you can drag it either only horizontally or only vertically. I'm trying to move my cursor over here, and it's way off to the left-hand side, and it's still trying to move it horizontally. Now the only thing is, if I get it up to a certain point, like if I drag it up to a certain point, it assumes that I'm trying to drag it vertically, and then it resets there. But if I just bring the mouse back down, it continues moving vertically as opposed to horizontally. So that is the movement tool. Otherwise, I can let go of Control, and I can just drag the tool wherever. Huh, interesting. There we go. Had a coughing fit for a second there. I'm back. Scale the shape by dragging in a handle. We just went over that. Rotate it. Oh yeah, that's a good point. We can also specifically set, so like as we drag it, as you can see, as we drag it and apparently reveal the box again, as you can see, the X and Y values, if you watch them up here, they change. So we can set specific X and Y values. So let's set like 20, and then the Y is going to be 8. And boom, there you go. Now it's over here, and then we can set the width and the height as well. So, I'm just going to continue coughing. If we increase the width to like 10, boom, now it's comically wide. But then we can increase the height to 20, and boom, now it's it's got those parameters. Set it back to 2 though. And that's 2000. I just wanted 2. And we'll set this to 1. Well, we'll set it to 1.5. There. So now it's like a shaped like a sponge. I don't know why that's the first thing I thought of, but like a sponge, like a dish sponge, or a bar of soap. Apparently, I need to clean something. Yeah, so you can move objects in front of or behind other objects, so there's an order to it as well. So as you can see, if I drag this up here, it sort of gets hidden behind it. However, I can, well, interesting. Well, okay. So it's not available in the right click menu, but if I select an object and come up here, you see there's these 4 buttons. There's 2 of them with like a brown box, and there are 2 of them with a blue box. The brown box ones lower the selection so that it's rendered behind something. The blue box ones move the select or raise the selection so that it is rendered in front of something. What do I mean by that? Well, let's just test it out. So let me click this button, and boom, now suddenly it's on top of the box. If I click the brown button again to move it back, boom, it disappears behind it. So that's all that does, is it just allows you to change the order in which something's rendered. So I can do in front of everything, I can do in between the two, I can do it behind the box. Again, all in the efforts of, making more complex shapes and things like that. So finally, and I think this is going to be the last thing we're going to cover today, there are the align buttons. So if I select all these and I go to Object, Align and Distribute, and hit that one. Then our little menu over here on the right-hand side changes. The fill and stroke is still down here, but now we've got align and distribute in addition to that. And I can select these objects in order to align them and sort of get everything moved together in a specific way. So why don't we center these vertically and horizontally? And as you can see now, it's probably kind of hard to see, so let me move it over here. If I select these and then I center them on the vertical axis, boop, now it aligns them. I can also move everything over to one side or the other. I can align everything to the right side. I'm actually going to move everything back over here and realign on the center axis. I'm going to do the same thing with these two in order to center it. And you can center it on the horizontal axis as well, so that it looks a little bit nicer. And I can select everything, center it on the horizontal axis, and there, now everything's aligned. That's a very useful tool for lining things up if you need to. Distribute allows you to basically just space everything evenly if you need to. Create some wonderful modern art. Now we can unalign everything. Whoops. Try not to do that. Good Lord. Align everything vertically again. Align everything horizontally. Oh my goodness. But yeah, so that's what the align and distribute is good for, is for making sure that everything is lined up nice and neat. Just good for that. And I guess one more thing. Control D will allow you to copy an object. Boom. Now I have a second one. Didn't look like it did anything at first because it duplicates it exactly on top of the other object. So as you can see, I can drag this around. There's nothing underneath it, but if I hit Control D, start dragging again, there's another circle underneath it because it duplicated it exactly. But yeah, as a final note, you can duplicate a whole bunch of stuff, a whole selection of objects as opposed to a single one, which can be useful for duplicating more complex shapes for whatever reason that you might need it for. But yeah, so that's going to do it for today. Let's go ahead and do the poll questions, and then I'll let you guys free for the weekends because it looks pretty. Yeah, there you go. I'll let you guys free for the weekends. You know, have a wonderful weekend, and you'll meet up with Mr. Dubik again on Monday, and then I'll see you again on Wednesday. But yeah, let's go ahead and do the poll questions.